If I were to say that Kriemhild looks like a goth Mordred, would anybody agree with that statement? Because to be fair, in my defense, they are drawn by the exact same person, and this was the exact thought I had whenever she dropped over on the JP side of things, which was just a nice bonus on top of her being a really strong servant in general. So if you're going to be going on the Charlemagne banner and you happen to pick up a couple of copies of Kriemhild over there, or maybe Kriemhild is your main target much like myself, you'll be delighted to know that she's quite the strong servant with pretty good applications going into some challenge quests, and also can help you out in some of these 90 plus or 90 plus nodes due to having a big battery and also being a berserker. Now, she's not going to hit quite as hard as people like, say, Berserker Kentoki, but unlike Kentoki, you know, she's on rate up right now, she's a 4-star, it's more likely that maybe you get some extra copies of her, so then she could kind of rival that damage, plus she has double power mod, so in certain scenarios, you might not even notice the difference, and hey, she might actually be better sometimes. But if you couldn't already tell by the intro segment, we're going to be talking about Kriemhild, who is on rate up over on the JP side of things, going over her stat skills, and I will pretty much tell you everything about her because I have been using this servant ever since she came out over on the JP side of things, and I have absolutely loved using this servant. And as such, I will be giving you guys all the little intricacies and details as someone who has been using her for the last 2 years. So make sure you drop a like, make sure you subscribe if you like being informed on the goings on of both versions of FGO. And with that, let's start getting into her kit, starting off with her hits, where she is rocking the deck that I love to see. You guys know that I love my sustain teams. I don't care if it takes me 7 turns versus 3 turns trying to finish the quest, if I can guarantee get the quest done. And so rocking a double Buster, double Arch deck, sure, does mean you're not going to be going crazy with the Buster Brave Chains, but spoiler alert, she is an Arts unit, and I think this was the proper way to go about doing this, especially as we will start to get Lady Avalon during the summer event. Kriemhild herself will really appreciate being around these very thick arts units that can give her invincibility, solemn defense, or whatever you have laying around. Maybe you just have waivers. She'll appreciate the damage cut as well. Bottom line, having double arts cards does really help out your supports in finding their own NPs, as well as Kriemhild being able to spam her own. And also, spoiler alert, her NP is really strong, so you want to be firing that as much as possible. Her NP gain might look a little bit low, but do keep in mind that you will be pairing her with Castoria, probably also Lady Avalon or Tamamu if you have her lying around, and they'll be giving her big arts buff and NP gain buff, so she will be fine when it comes to spamming her NP. But much like Charlemagne, I would say that her hits and her passive seem very unassuming. I mean, she is rocking the 5-hit extra attack, which you know we love to see, as it is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage, with 5 being that sweet spot, and any higher you might just be the best unit in the game. But honestly, aside from that, all the hits being 3 is very average. It's enough to get the job done, but not enough to do anything super crazy. I mean, even her passive skill is just giving her a 12% passive buster buff, which is kind of nice, because in those arts team comps, you're not really going to be getting a buster buff unless, I don't know, maybe you wanted to bring Merlin because you wanted to do extra sustain instead of Proto Merlin. I mean, I guess if you don't pull her, he works, but you're mainly going to be doing arts damage. But I think when we start getting into her skills, and especially her NP, you start to see that she just has a very well-rounded kit. Starting off with her first skill, let's just start diving right into this. She's going to reduce all enemies' NP gauge by 1, reduce all of their defense by 20% for 3 turns, and reduce their critical attack chance by 20% for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. This might seem very unassuming, but it's very much a utility skill, and I like the way that this is positioned in the arts teams specifically, because you have people like, say, Proto Merlin, or Merlin if you're using him in that slot, that both have an AoE invincibility for your entire party. Castoria has targetable invincibility and solemn defense on her own NP, but they don't have a way to really modulate the enemy's NP ticks unless you're specifically using Tamamu, but I know you guys aren't using Tamamu. I've read my comment section enough to know that people are just going to be like, I'm just going to use double Castoria. And so if you're doing that, this is an extra layer of survivability in that if you don't have one of your skills available, or you're in one of those weird spots where your NP isn't up, which I did find myself in the Alco CQ on the JP side of things. I uploaded that like a week ago. There were some weird turns where I might just be out of NP and might just find myself in a really weird position, and someone like Kriemhild would be really good for that. Now, obviously for the Alco fight, she's a foreigner, but I'm using that as an example that some challenge quests can be a little bit weird. And so having a way to remove a tick from the enemy to buy yourself that extra crucial turn will come in clutch sometimes, as well as it's providing technically extra survivability and reducing their critical attack chance, so you're not going to be taking wayward crits, while also getting some bonus damage by lowering their defense. So it's just a very solid skill all around. Moving into her second skill, you could treat this as her just standard .jpg really good damage skill. You pretty much want this up at all times. And with the Art, Buster, and Chaotic Power mod all being up for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown, it will be up a decent bit of times. Now do keep in mind that 30% Buster buff is more like a 42% Buster buff because of her passive skill, so if you're noticing that her Buster cards are doing some pretty solid damage, that would be why she almost has a Buster mana burst when this skill is up. And the arts buff is also nice because even if for whatever reason you're not able to bring a friend Castoria, maybe you're doing like an advanced quest and you can't bring a friend Castoria and you got to rely on, I don't know, say a Tamamo waiver setup, getting her own arts buff is going to be very nice for giving her that extra little bit of damage, but also NP gain on her own arts cards and her own NP. And then the Chaotic Power mod is pretty solid. I think this benefits her a bit more than, say, Charlemagne's evil crit damage that we talked about yesterday, because she's a berserker, so all of these people are pretty much free eats for her, except for people like Yang, who's chaotic, but, you know, if you can't hit 1 or 2 of the foreigners, that's perfectly fine, because everybody else is basically free eats, and there's a decent bit of enemies that are on the chaotic alignment chart thing. I mean, there's not really any free quest enemies you're going to be running into, but there's bosses. You know, if you still haven't done Oku, if you haven't done Seraph, you know, you've got like Kama, Kiara's in there. Again, like Charlemagne that we talked about yesterday, being able to help you out in the Koyanskaya fight if you have not unlocked that yet and have not finished it. She can also help you out in that fight by just kind of like chopping her down. Although I'm pretty sure there might be a better option than Kriemhild for that fight, but you know, hey, you could use her in there if you really need to, you know. And it's just a little nice cherry on top because it is a 50% power mod, so it's going to be giving her a little bit of extra damage against those chaotic enemies, and it does have some overlap with her other power mod, which we will talk about when we get to her NP. But finally, let's close this out with her third skill, which is a targetable taunt, which, if you've ever used ME Assassin, is extremely useful, but because she's a berserker and Kriemhild really doesn't want to take any damage because she will get blown up because a slight gust of wind kind of does most berserkers in, this can be very nice if you just want to pass this off to one of your other enemies. Say you're fighting an assassin boss, you could be like, hey, I want you to go target Castoria because she's going to take no damage from this anyway, and it buys me an extra turn to make sure that my Kriemhild doesn't go down. Maybe she's at really low HP, or maybe they're about to blast you with an NP or something at single target. You'd be like, all right, take out Castoria, cycle in the next buffer, you know, get that person out of here. And it's just nice. It has definitely saved my skin more times than I can count, just being able to be like, go attack this person over here and leave me alone. I just want to make sure I focus on that because I know most people are having big eyes awooga on that 50% battery, which is why I think she's really good going into 90 plus or 90 plus nodes, and I have used her every now and then, at least when she does have the chaotic or dragon power mod, or hopefully both at times. But it's also really good for going into CQs, you know, like if you ever just need to burst fire your NP, this being on a 6-turn cooldown ain't all that bad for being able to get your NP back consistently, and it has a heal, a 3k heal at that, which is kind of nice because Castoria does not provide any healing for each one of the very few things that she does not do. We will get Proto Merlin, who will give you max HP buffs, which is technically a bit better than recovering your HP, but it is nice that if you find yourself in a solo situation and you just need a little bit of extra HP to kind of finish out the fight, you know, she does have that. It's just a nice little thing that's tacked onto her kit. But let's talk about the NP, because her NP, I think, is nuts. First and foremost, she's removing all enemies' defensive buffs before she does damage, so think about how annoying it is to fight somebody like Amakusa, or how good it feels to be using Amakusa, where you just can use him and remove all the enemy's NPs and just blast them. It's a very similar effect to that. Now, you're not removing their offensive buffs, which is also really nice if they start stacking attack or crit damage or whatnot, but this is very good. You know, if an enemy throws up a dodge, if they throw up a invincibility or something, you're not going to be stopped by that. You can just yeet that off of them and continue to do damage. It kind of means that Kriemhild doesn't suffer some of the problems that other DPSs might have, where they can get slowed down in the initiative that they've got going on because the enemy randomly popped like a 3 dodge skill, or they popped a 1-turn invincibility, and you're just sitting around like, well, I guess we'll just sit here for a turn. Kriemhild doesn't have that problem. Then she's also packing a pretty good power mod, a full 150% bonus damage against dragon enemies, which does include a decent bit of servants. Not a whole lot, but there are a decent chunk of them. And again, it is better because she is a berserker. So instead of her being like Sigurd, who has the power mod, I mean, it's like, yeah, you could bring Sigurd to go fight in Artoria, but really he's going to shine against the Lancer dragons. Well, Kriemhild can hit everybody here because she's a berserker, except for MHXX and Idol Altar because they're foreigners. But if you wanted to bring her against them because she does still have the big power mod, you could be my guest in trying that. But there's also a decent bit of free quest enemies that you'll run into. There's like the really big dragons you can run into. The dinosaurs that we get in Lost Belt 7 do count as dragon enemies. If you're struggling with, say, the Albion fight in Lost Belt 6, obviously, duh, that's a dragon. Because Surtur in Lost Belt 2 also absorbs Fenrir, he's a dragon, so you could beat him up if you're still struggling with that. Just very, very good things to being able to hit. Again, I know it's not the most exhaustive list of people, but that combined with the chaotic power mod does make for a pretty nice 1-2 combo. And there are a couple of servants that do fall under that chaotic dragon lineup, which ironically, one of them is Siegfried, which I find very funny. It's like, yeah, I just blow my husband up into the sun. I have 200% special damage against him, which I think is very, very funny. But you've also got people like Ibuki on there as well. So if you need to go beat up the Lost Belt 5.5 boss, you know, she's really good for that as well. And then she also has ramping damage technically because she does reduce the enemy's arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns. So each NP is going to do more damage than the last. You can just see that she's a very, very solid servant. Just kind of doing good things. Nothing super insane. She's not like nut-bustingly broken. But she's one of those solid servants that's just nice to have in your box. You know, you're not going to break her out for every single fight. Obviously, there's better single targets to use. But I have just found myself breaking her out even against enemies that I'm type neutral against. Or I guess I don't have power mod against because, again, Berserker, how you type neutral with Berserker. But I'll break her out for a lot of fights and she just kind of does well for me. If you've been out to any of my streams, which is linked down in the description, by the way, you'll probably have seen me done some clears with Kriemhild, and I'll probably use her if I'm able to pull her after I do my Ruler Moriarty rolls. I'll probably be using her in a lot of fights, and even if I don't end up pulling her, I'll just probably grab a friend, load up the Castoria and the Tamamo, and that'll probably be good enough. And at the end of the year, when we do the tier list, she's probably just going to end up in B or B+, because she's just a very, very solid servant. Nothing too broken, but it's just solid. You could break her out, and she'll pretty much do the same thing every single time very, very well, which I do like in my servants. I like a good bit of consistency, and I found that with Kriemhild. And then if she happens to get, you know, one of her 2 power mods, that's just even better on top of it. Her NP1 damage can be a little bit on the low side. I do want to go ahead and forewarn people about that. But as I have recently got her to NP2 over on the JP side of things, she definitely does feel a lot better once you get her to that NP2 margin. A lot of those kills that you might be missing out on because NP1 damage is a little bit lower, you start to secure more consistently and she just feels really good. Obviously, she's missing stuff like crit damage, which is a little bit unfortunate, but true to her being an art servant, the whole name of the game is just spam the NP, remove all their buffs, and then just beat them into the dirt. So let me know if you were lucky enough to get Kriemhild, as the banner has been out for about a day. Me, myself, personally, like I just mentioned, I'm going to be going for Ruler Moriarty first, and then any Saint Courts that I have left over, I'm going to bring over to this banner. Because Ruler Moriarty, not to spoil anything for Tron, but he is pretty sick. I do think he's a really, really cool dude. So stay posted for that. And with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.